Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is David Brand, and I'm really excited to welcome all of you today to an incredibly special program sponsored by the Jewish Community Relations Council of our Federation, the Simon Family JCC, the Embassy of Israel, and just an amazing, amazing guest we have today. The song you just heard probably could not have been better selected for our guest today. A dear friend for a number of years, Danna Stern. Danna is the managing director of Yes Television Studios in Israel. And if you have enjoyed any number of Israeli-based television content, you have Danna Stern to thank for that. I've known Danna for a number of years, and just an incredible professional, an incredible human being. And Danna, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Just
David.
one quick note, there will be a Q&A at the end. And for those of you who are watching, there is a Q&A mod button at the bottom of your screen. So please send your questions there, and we'll deal with that at the very end of the show. So please, let's be sure of that. I want to give a very quick introduction to Danna. I don't want to read it. It's too long. So instead, I will just tell you that, as I said earlier, if there is a television show, Fuda, Shistel, Your Honor, anything, whether it's original content or adaptations, the young lady on the screen right now is who you say thanks to. There are not many people, I think, in America or in Israel or are recognized globally as a television executive who's accomplished more than Danna. And I think we'll have this great opportunity to talk about it. And Danna was really gracious in sending us, which we'll get to in a little while, some clips that have never been seen before, some photographs about a new generation of Fuda that has never been seen before. And I think everybody should have received a link to some episodes of a brand new show that will be appearing soon on HBO Max called On the Spectrum, which everybody can see before HBO Max has its American premiere. So Danna, again, thank you for your kindness, your graciousness, and just thanks for being with us. You want to give us a brief introduction of how you got to where you are?
Wow. Well, it goes back a little while. I love that you said I was young. Like, it's been worth it already. So, I celebrated a very round birthday just a couple weeks back. So that means a lot. But I started out when I was actually 18. I was a news producer at the Israeli Army Radio. That's how I kind of got my start in the business. And from there, it's a slippery slope into physical production, news production, series production. So I kind of started on the production side out in the field for about 10 years. And then I kind of switched over and went to the executive side. I started up by heading acquisitions for Yes. DBS is a satellite platform, kind of like a DirecTV, if you will, or Sky for people who are a little familiar with the European content market. I used to oversee the acquisition of series, movies, documentaries, basically everything apart from sports rights. I kind of segued from that and added to my brief. I was overseeing all the channel carriage agreements, the Discoveries, the CNNs. When VOD started to happen, I launched our SVOD service and started getting into more and more into production, mostly non-scripted, pure documentaries. And then about 6 years ago, I think, 2015, so it would have been 6 years, Fuda happened. And Fuda is, we've been producing for about 15 years. Until then, Israel produces under regulation. We actually have to spend, this is us and this is true for the industry, 8% of our revenues on original Hebrew-speaking programming. So that's why you're seeing so much content come out of Israel. Some of it, niche, maybe not as commercial, and because we have to spend the money so we can take those risks. So we've been producing, at that point, we were producing for about 15 years, but nothing kind of major that broke through. And then obviously Fuda, from the first cut, from the first time we saw it, it was, it was definitely something different. It was unique. It was exciting. It felt raw and authentic. And, the guys, Avi and Lior, and we've been really good friends ever since, kind of said, would you look over this and see that it, makes it through as it should? We've never worked with a broadcaster before. We don't know what that's like. I kind of knew Avi from our previous days as journalists. and he kind of said, could you just make sure that, our show is taken care of at the network and it's promoted well, and if there's any information we should know and any kind of thing, just kind of give us the ins and outs. And we got working together, and then when the show became a thing in Israel, it was obvious there was additional potential. And we took it out into the market, and thankfully we found a really good partner at Netflix. We had an executive at the time. His name was Larry Tans, and he loved it from the first moment he saw it. They made us a really good offer, and we were actually, in 2016, the first foreign language series to hit Netflix. And it sounds ridiculous when you say it now, that it's only been,
right.
It's only been a little while, but yeah.
You were kind enough to speak to one of our missions a couple of years ago, and you brought with you a young lady who was, I think, the first female writer on the show. But you told us a story that I think our people would love to hear. I believe I've got it right, that the very first time you presented Fuda, the reaction wasn't so amazing. Can you share that a little?
Well, it was so different. Right? I mean, everything about it was different. And by the way, it had a different name as well. Calling it, Fauda in Arabic means chaos. Everybody seems to know it now, and people use it kind of interchangeably, but it was a brand new word. As far as we were concerned, nobody knew what it was. So it was all of it together was kind of very unique. And we were never sure if people were going to respond well to a show about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We kind of felt, everybody's watching it on TV. It's part of our news cycle. Are people going to connect, or are they going to be a little hesitant? And I have to say, we were pleasantly surprised. I think the problem was initially when they pitched it. These two guys had never done anything on television before. Lior was an actor and is a creative person. He's, by the way, he comes from advertising. And Avi is a journalist and was a journalist for many, many years. So they kind of literally came off the street and said, look, we were in this unit together. We had an idea for a show, which everybody always does. Many, many people have ideas for their shows, but does not a series make. There's a very long process involved with having, a story to tell and having the ability to tell it. And they kind of pretty much came off the street. And at first we turned them down. That was a difficult, but that happens. And then that happens to most people. Starting out. So I think that was the part that was difficult. I give them, A for tenacity, although they were, they're persistent. They were very Israeli about it. They called up everybody they knew that they thought knew one of us and made it back. And, the rest is history. And that opened up the business for us. That opened up a ton of doors and so many opportunities.
So I'm going to save the big Fuda question in a minute. But one of the things that you shared a while back with us in a conversation was that Fuda has become an adaptation in countries around the world. And we've got some photos to put up right now. So why don't we put the photos up, and if you wouldn't mind, take us through.
I can set it up first if we want. I can just give a little. So Fuda, everybody watches the original Fuda. And as I said, that was the first Israeli show to air in its original version. So, Hebrew and Arabic, the way we produced it for the local market, and thanks to technology and the platform that Netflix gave us, the ability to take a foreign language show and to launch it in multiple territories. It was 190 countries and territories at the time in multiple language versions on the same day. It's no small feat if you think about it. Today, that just seems, the normal. Back in 2016, it was like, oh my God, how are they going to make that happen? Even little things like the fact that in Israel, our Netflix is actually from right to left, just getting that, making sure that the user interface can read, Hebrew and Arabic, and think about the Asian, languages. So all that takes a lot of technology to make work. And so that was really the show. So that's what everybody knows us for. But Fuda is also just a great story about people in a constant conflict, trying, to survive and realizing they're humans on both sides, and it's all very gray, and there's no heroes and there's no villains, and, war sucks. And unfortunately for all of us, there are other countries in the world where that situation exists and perpetuates. And what we've done with Fuda is, we have the format right. So that basically means you can take the basic idea, the mechanisms that work, the main characters, and adapt that for the local market. We've had pitches from so many countries throughout the world, including the US, which we never did. We never did a Fuda US. I don't think we should do one, but you never know. If anybody has a really good take, I'll be happy to hear it. But the reason really was we never did the US one because there's no conflict that's inherent, that's really one of a survivalist. And the ones we have done are the one we'll see in a second, but we're doing the UK, Ireland. It's a period piece about the Troubles, and the one that you're just going to be seeing started filming on very tail end of February this year after a year postponement due to COVID is India. Netflix is a
Let's
huge.
just put those pictures. Can we put those pictures up?
Let's just see them. And I have to say, this is literally the first shot on the first day. This is a little shrine for the first moment of filming, and I think we'll see a couple of other ones. But basically, it's a prayer to all the gods that will help through the production in India. It's huge. The budget on this is twice as a normal series in India for them. They're doing 12 episodes, very much like us, and it's about the Kashmiri problem. And this is actually shot in Mumbai, and they will be moving up to Kashmir when it warms up a little bit in May. So that's something to look forward to. And I just love this picture. I love the fact that the show that we did here about our story, our conflict, is resonating like this with a country so far away, with such different issues, and yet, something about the content and the storytelling unites us. And by the way, nobody's seen these pictures. These are straight off my WhatsApp. So I trust nobody is taking screenshots right now.
Right. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. But by the way, you can tell, right? I mean, there's Jesus in there. There's numerous other gods, Indian gods. There are hundreds of them. I think it's beautiful. I think it's so touching.
Well, and no screenshots, no sharing. So it seems as though that this explosion, maybe a bad word to use, this explosion of Israeli content has come from somewhere. So it's not like all of a sudden 5 years ago, all these young people, these young writers all of a sudden said, hey, let's write great content. So where did it come from all of a sudden? I mean, it's...
So, the unsexy part about it is, again, it's regulation. And it's true for us. We're multi-channel subscription service. There's another one. We have a competitor on cable. And free-to-air channels, same regulation applies. They actually have to spend 15% of their revenues on original Hebrew-speaking programming. So that means there's an industry here that has to continue producing. And it doesn't matter if the shows, do well. Obviously, you want them to do well and resonate with an audience. But it's not about, are you making money on the commercials? Is the rating high enough? It's not that crazy dash that you have in the US, that you're ratings driven, that it becomes very commercial, and therefore you can't take a lot of creative risks. You're going to be doing, the 14th season of Supernatural if it sells ads, or you're going to be doing the 20th season of, Law and Order, or 22nd season. So because that's going to keep working. So for us, because there's this regulation, we were free to take more creative risks. And young people, as you said, knew that they were growing up in a country where there's constant production. There just has to be constant production. So kids who grew up when we launched, 21 years ago, or, they were 10, they were 20, now they watched what we were making back then, took it upon themselves to become creators, filmmakers, television writers, actors, knowing there's an industry there waiting for them. So over the years, we saw proliferation of film schools, of television departments, production. And, the more you do this, the better you get at it. So I think kind of what happened to us back in 2015 is we got to that point. We were just, up until then, we were trying it out. And then, we kind of figured out what we were doing. And it's a very steep learning curve. And I think that's the time it took us to get to, figuring out how we were going to produce and when. But to be fair, way before Fuda, there was Treatment. Treatment is an Israeli format that has sold exceptionally well in adaptations throughout the world. In fact, it's doing so well that HBO is just making another In Treatment, a new one. So they did one 10 years ago, and they just redid it. France just got a new version that's doing exceptionally well. And that was a format. So that was not the original. You haven't seen the original Hebrew speaking show, but right. The format has been adapted. After that, there was Homeland. That show did phenomenally well. It ran for 8 years. That's nearly unheard of these days, based on an Israeli show. And then, there's Farada, obviously a series in the original. And after us, there's been so many that have come in our path. There was Our Boys on HBO, which was originally produced for the U.S. market. That could never have happened without a Fuda. They would never have thought of producing a Hebrew and Arabic language show.
And of course, there's Your Honor, which has been huge on Showtime.
And Your Honor is another one of our shows. And But to continuing on, I mean, this year alone, HBO Max launched Valley of the Tears. Apple TV launched two Israeli shows during COVID, Tehran and Losing Alice. So there's been a proliferation, and all these. I kind of look at it as kind of a trail that we all kind of walk in each other's footsteps, and we all do our little bit, and hopefully do well and make audiences interested enough so the next project that comes along gets sold, gets distribution, and obviously reaches an audience.
Is there a collaboration sort of roundtable after hours with a great bottle of wine or scotch when you and your counterparts are sitting together and sort of as a television cabal and are thinking about, gee, how do we take this to the next level? Because there is competition, but there's certainly enough streaming platforms for everybody. But just wondering if there's any interaction, and that may be an inappropriate question, but I've known you long enough to know to ask you that.
No, I love that idea, that thought. There's no forum of such, but obviously, and certainly in the time that we could travel, we do see each other extensively in festivals and conferences, throughout. Sometimes it was funny. I remember I was sitting in the waiting room for one of the studios, and I'm sitting they're notoriously late. So you come, no matter whenever you come, they make you wait. And then I'm waiting around and I see another Israeli come out of a meeting in LA, right? Like, what are the odds? I mean, it's that, familiar, and we do kind of, we do have a pretty good access to the town, as they say. But no, we haven't really sat down and strategized. I don't know if that's legal.
So let me a final question on Fuda without divulging anything, because there's only about 100 of us on this call, so your secret's safe with us. Is there anything we can look forward to soon, down the road, maybe, possibly? I'm sorry?
Define soon.
Soon, okay. I'll let you define soon. These things take time because you got to write them, you got to find a place, you got to get the people lined up. They have other things they're doing.
Exactly. So Avi and Lior just literally wrapped 2 weeks ago. They finished shooting their new Netflix series, which the tentative title is Hit and Run. That's supposed to launch in September on Netflix. And that was a show that was shot half in New York and half in Israel. And actually, they were shooting all the way through last March when COVID hit, and they had to stop production. Everything was halted. They had humongous crews here. We've never seen a production this size before. Never has this amount of money been spent on anything in our industry. And everybody has just shut down one day with, I think it was 2.5 weeks to go to finish the shoot, and everybody went home for a year. So they just came back at the end of February. They finished the shoot, and everybody's been kind of preoccupied with that. And with COVID, we never knew, when would be the right time to kind of to go on. So Fuda 4 is going to be a little bit delayed. We don't have a start date yet. We're hoping it is, this year that we shoot. And then obviously once we do that, there's post-production, there's editing, we've got to figure out schedules. I don't know. I mean, it's maybe a year from now. Yeah. It's kind of my guess. You'll see it, maybe, give or take.
We'll anxiously await. So there are probably two issues that at least I think the American Jewish community really understands and is constantly being barraged with. And that is the conflict, which let's just say was dealt with by the Fuda series and Valley of the Tears and that kind of conflict-based story. And then there's the issues amongst the Orthodox, the Haredim, and that brings us obviously to and I know you have a clip that you want to that you were kind enough to share with us. So if we want to set that up, but again, the backstory to that has been incredible because some of the actors are Haredim, I think, some are not, or none of them.
Actually, none of them are.
Okay. So
there's a few extras and background actors, but of the main cast and even minor cast, no one is religious. Okay. The two showrunners, creators, writers are, most certainly they are. They actually met in a yeshiva. They thought of the show having, so I think it's been widely reported, but basically they were having lunch at a restaurant called Shtisa, when in Jerusalem, there's now another branch in Bnei Brak, when they said they want to tell a family drama and they want it set in the world that they know, and everybody starts, and this is, my recommendation to anybody wanting to break into this business, write what you know, especially for your first project. I mean, that's the only way to really make something that matters. So
Sure.
that's what they did. And they wanted to write about an ultra Orthodox family and the rituals and the issues that they have. And that's how it came together.
Well, let me ask you
So,
this question, because I know that Farada was very well received in the territories. So we heard that people really liked it. It also gave Palestinian actors great access. I think you and I were once talking about the young fella who became sort of the head of the, I think in season 2. And then
Firas,
the kid is just,
Firas, Firas just
his
finished
calendar
giving
is
for
completely
Netflix.
booked. I mean,
Yeah.
he's booked.
Oh, they're all. Firas, who was the head of the Palestinian kind of in season 2, Firas Nasser, who comes from Nazareth, by the way, who is lovely, who's just an amazing, super talented, actual theater, is just theatrically trained. So he comes from the theater. He's trained in drama, and he has since booked an Apple series, a Netflix series. He's well represented in the U.S. He's doing phenomenally well. And that's true for all of them, by the way.
Right.
They've all
Well,
gone on to do so many things.
the reason I ask is because I'm wondering if in the Masorti, the non-Orthodox community in Israel, how they responded to the show, given there is natural tension that exists in the country. All you got to do is pick up Jerusalem
Oh,
Post Times of Israel. Has there been any cultural shifts or
well, for Stisa, so I mean, first of all, it's a show that religious people love to watch, and they don't have a TV, so it's one of the most unfortunately pirated shows in the country. It's widely shared on Google Drives, on Telegram, on WhatsApp, on even Disc on Keys. People will watch the show, and they have since the first season. I
Mhm.
once did a little tour of Bnei Brak in the afternoon, just on Motzei Shabbat, so before and this kind family kind of saw us on the street. I actually had a foreign guest, an American friend of mine who was visiting at the time, and they saw we were kind of very much out of water. We didn't know where we were going, and they kind of said, "Oh, do you want to come up for Havdalah?" Which was really, really nice. So we come up, and they're like, "What do you do? What do you do?" And the daughter takes me aside and says to me, once I said kind of what I do, she says to me, "I've watched Stiesel." And this is an ultra Orthodox, you didn't even think they had a computer. Um, because it's a kosher show, so they actually really like it. I think the secular Jews watch it for the same reason a lot of foreigners watch it. It's a peek behind the curtain for us. Although we live here, and Bnei Brak is probably a 10-minute drive from where I am right now in Tel Aviv, it's a whole different world for us. It's just we know of the rituals, and we know obviously we share the same holidays and the same religion, and mostly the same beliefs, but it's such a different world for us. So it kind of allows us to peek through, and it's just widely very much loved. I mean, people look at it as just a great family drama, and it's kosher. There's nothing, there's nothing there that's inappropriate, and I
Right.
think that's why people of all ages and all beliefs watch it.
Have there been big challenges between? Well, you want to show the? I have a question.
Yep.
And let's show the clip. How's that?
Okay, this is a preview for season 3, which we can talk about when we come back.
So thank you for sharing that with us. That's never been seen before in America. That I know. So thank you.
So I can plug the new season now. I mean, it's only a week away. It's March 25th. It'll launch on Netflix globally, pretty much everywhere in the world, which is phenomenal when you think about it. That little show that could. Um, and, hopefully people will love it. There's 9 episodes to the season. It deals with a lot of super important, very deep themes, and everybody in it is wonderful. And obviously, we talked about the opportunities that our shows have given both creators and actors. I mean, Sheila Haas, oh my God, she's just exploded, obviously, since the first couple of seasons in Unorthodox. So
Was
it's
there
great.
a huge difference in the whole process between filming something like Farada, which obviously aside from the action scenes, and She Still, which is sort of more of a tighter set, I would think. The journey between those had to be very challenging for any company, and Yes is a big company, was did it present unique challenges in terms of how you all approached it?
Well, I mean, they're obviously they're budgeted differently and they're spaced out differently. And it's a whole different process as far as the number of days that we actually film, the number of minutes that we can get to. So, but essentially all production, is pretty much the same. It's a question of budget
Right.
and, and pacing and setting. So obviously, Fuda has much of more of a setup. Every scene, there's multiple people, there's a lot of action, a lot of background, bigger crew, like all of that. Stiesel is certainly contained. I don't think we had a scene in this new season that probably had more than 4 people in it. We do have one at the tail end. There's a nice surprise at the end of that episode 9. I think that's probably our biggest scene. Maybe that had 10 people in it. So essentially, it's almost it's almost like watching a play at times. I mean, there's 2-3 people in a room speaking, and yet it's so intense and so smart and also
Right.
funny.
One of the comparisons that friends of mine have made, Israel's been known as this incredibly driven, high-tech environment. I mean, how many times do you go to APAC? How many times do you have to hear, Israel has more startups and more companies on NASDAQ than any place in America. But it seems as though this industry is starting to sort of rival the tech industry. That's just my take on it. And I think some others who are really, really impressed with how it's going. What's the future of this? I mean, where does it?
First of all, I would love to have those high-tech numbers. I was just reading today, I think eToro, a company just went public for like I think their initial valuation was like 10.4 billion. So I'll take it. I'll take any of those. Unfortunately, yeah, we don't have those opportunities.
But you talk about the film schools, because I think every major university now has a film school, and that just becomes a bigger and bigger industry.
When I went to university here, when I did my undergrad, there was one film school in the entire country. Tel Aviv University was the only film school that we have. I think we have 8 now. And by the way, if you wanted to study journalism or communication, you could only do a master's in it. There was no undergrad. I mean, it was that, we were so backward. And we've come real, I mean, the growth here has been wonderful and the opportunities have been wonderful. But I think, the story, and it's funny that you mentioned APAC, and unfortunately, I think, we could have been there this week if
this week, right.
This week.
Not happening.
It's not happening. Next year. There's always next year, right? And certainly things we didn't talk about COVID, but the situation here is unbelievable. It's like it's behind us. I mean, people are going out, they're maskless, don't learn from us. Everybody's partying, everybody's, just kind of living life again. It's like unbelievable. And how quickly everybody, I think over 60% already has been vaccinated twice. So we've certainly gone back to that. So it feels like life is going back to normal and much quicker, I think, than, one would have thought, considering what we all went through. So hopefully, events like APAC will be back next year and we will have an opportunity to share in content. But I think the story is one of, it's nice to have a different story to tell about Israeli success. It doesn't have to be, high tech, we invented ways, or we invented, it could be about content. Have you seen, Stiesel? Have you watched, Tehran? That's an Israeli show. There's like a sense of pride, I think, in what we do and the fact that we're doing it well and our stories resonate. And it's just a good conversation starter. And I think it's something to be proud of for all of us. And
well, in the time we have left, let's move on to 2 new shows. If you would take us through On the Spectrum, and also I'd like to talk about Beauty Queen in Jerusalem, which you were again kind enough to send us a clip for. Let's start with Beauty Queen in Jerusalem. Okay. We've gotten a number of questions about On the Spectrum, some of them very personal and very, very meaningful questions about basically thanking you for doing this. So let's talk about Beauty Queen in Jerusalem first, and then we'll.
Okay. Well, I think it's a nice segue from Stiesel to Beauty Queen, only because it does have, the same star, and we'll see it. And I will kind of set this up. Beauty Queen of Jerusalem is the biggest show we've ever done. It's our most expensive show by far. It's the longest shoot we ever had. It's a huge financial risk. on everybody's part, and everybody who worked on it just gave it their A game. And it's based on a book, on a novel. It's available in English and multiple languages. It's the #1 bestseller here. It's actually the best-selling book of the last 20 years. Every
Wow.
person has read it. So it's extremely well known. It was written by somebody who had never written a novel before. I think she was well into her 50s when she wrote it. Her name is Slaveti Shailevi, so there's hope in this story. She was a journalist for many years, kind of a lifestyle journalist, and decided she just wanted to write a book. And she went to the library every single day for 6 years. Started researching old newspapers, knew she wanted to tell something about her family that came from Jerusalem, that was Samechtet, the Sfaradi Tahor, so the original Jews that stayed in Jerusalem and have been living there for hundreds and hundreds of years and generations. And, she used a little bit of her own background, but did a lot of research and came up with this beautiful book that basically takes us through from the Ottoman Empire in 1917 all the way through the 70s in the book. We're going to end the first 2 seasons around the late 1930s, and hopefully, if it does well, we'll bring it back and go all the way through the War of Independence and the establishment of the state of Israel. It's the first historical piece we've ever done, and I think the country's ever done. It's the first period piece we've ever done for television. It was actually we were so scared to do it and didn't know what we were doing because there's no history of it, that we were going to shoot in the Ukraine, and because they have big sets and they have the costumes and they have cars and all the props and everything that you need to make kind of a period piece. None of that existed here, and then COVID happened, so we had to stay put and figure out how we're going to do it. And we were shipping in boxes and crates and cartons of costumes from the UK and just everywhere that we can get our hands on. And obviously production was delayed and was much more expensive than we had hoped. And there's COVID protocols to follow when you're in production now. And this is obviously before the vaccine, so you can only film a few people at a time. And anyway, everybody got tested. So it's a really long, lengthy, and expensive process. But hopefully the result is worth it. What we're going to be seeing now is just like the first trailer for it. It has not been released anywhere yet. This is the first time I've ever shown it. And I think we're going to put out some press after Shtisa launches. We'll hopefully have some time to spend with Beauty Queen of Jerusalem. The edits are almost done. We're going to have a couple of episodes, hopefully ready soon. We'll be taking them to buyers because obviously we want our shows distributed. So in Israel,
This has never been shown,
and it's not.
Hasn't been bought. So
and
nobody has seen this.
No, nobody's seen it. Not even close. If you Google it and you kind of do Beauty Queen of Jerusalem TV series, you'll see some of the press that we did and trying, to get buyers. And by buyers, I mean the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Apples of the world, the people who would buy and, showcase this for audiences throughout. I think we'll launch it here around June. Hasn't been set yet, but that's kind of the aim. And hopefully by then, we'll have a sale. I'm kind of hopeful. I hope people love it. It's not what expected from Israeli. I mean, it couldn't be more different from everything we've discussed thus far. I mean, but I hope you like it. So let's take a look.
Impressive, to say the least.
Certainly hope so. I mean, I'd love to see the audience because nobody's ever seen it, so I don't know what everybody's faces, and hopefully they're happy with the result. It is a multi-generational love story. It's gorgeous, it's lavish, it's melodramatic, and it's got, I think, we could play like a Israeli actor bingo on it because we seem to have the same actors on all of our shows. So in that, you could have seen Michael Aloni, who's obviously Kiva and Shtisel. He looks much younger without his beard and payas, and
right.
I think he looks great in this. Itzik, who was in Fuda, obviously, Captain Ayub, Itzik Cohen, who is lovely. He's in there too. You couldn't see Luna Mansour. She was also in Fuda. She was the belly dancer. Hisham Suleiman, who was in Fuda 1, the Panthers, also in it. So it's like it's getting a lot of our family back together again from various shows.
Well, the Q&A, the questions on Beauty Queen have been, the message I just got was, wow. Where do we see it all?
Where do we see it?
We're anxious to see where you sell it. But if anybody can sell it for good money, Donna, it'll be you.
I hope so. I mean,
so let's turn to what is really something very special to you and to so many people is On the Spectrum. And I think some of us have been fortunate to see it. And again, you were kind enough to send us the first 2 episodes. Can you give us some background onto why that?
sure, all of it. And I mean, I love all my shows, but this one's special. You know, I love all my babies, but there's always that one that you always smile when you get to work on. You feel privileged to get to work on, and you know that it's more important than the business aspect of it. And On the Spectrum was one of those. Danna, first of all, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, I think it's up for another week or so. You're happy to see it. And the reason we gave the first 2 episodes is because it will be available coming April 2nd, which is World Autism Day, on HBO Max in this original version. And that way, we're not just teasing you with 2 episodes. You can literally watch the rest. It's a 10-episode season. Hopefully we'll do a second one at some point. But the story of this is Danna was a young screenwriter. She came to us. She actually did a documentary with us about her brother who was autistic, and it was meant to follow his year ahead of his bar mitzvah as he's learning to read from the Haftarah. And it took him until he was 15 to be able to do it. And it was called Seret Bar Mitzvah, Bar Mitzvah movie. That was the first thing she'd ever did. It was very intimate. It was a lot of conversations between them and, the family, and how the family is kind of coping with having a son on the autistic spectrum. Her father, who was also a screenwriter, quit everything to take care of him and refuses to use the word autistic. Her mother, who is a therapist, knew from the onset what was going on. And there's a big kind of disconnect between the parents. I understand that's something that happens very, very often in families with people who are on the spectrum. And Donna did that little movie. We just loved it. And then she came back and said, well, I want to do a series about the same thing. And we said, sure. And then, by the way, she said she wanted to do a movie, and we said, sure. The movie was finally done, and it was actually played in the Cannes Film Festival this year. And by the way, Donna's now only 34, so she's had a movie in Cannes. She's got On the Spectrum launching on HBO Max. And actually, yesterday was the first day of production of the American adaptation of On the Spectrum, which is going to be called Forget Normal. And it's for Amazon. So it will be on Amazon Prime Video probably later on this year. Jason Katims, who is a wonderful, wonderful Jewish writer, showrunner, who's done Parenthood and Friday Night Lights, and has an autistic son himself, is actually the showrunner and the writer, the main lead writer on the American version. It's different from us. In their case, they did cast people who are on the spectrum as actors. We did not have that privilege. We're a very, very small country. We just don't have the pool of talent. And we did want to cast people on the spectrum. We had to come in for auditions. So there just wasn't, there wasn't an opportunity for us to do it. But we're super delighted that in the US they could, and they are giving people the opportunity to work in front of the camera as well, not just behind the scenes, which is something that kind of resonates with the show and the messaging of integrating people on the spectrum into society, working alongside other people, and giving a life that's as seemingly as normal as possible, and just living day to day with love and care. And I think that's the show. And Danna wrote a beautiful piece. It was always going to be directed by Yuval Scheffelman, who's a great director, and Guy Raz, who's our cinematographer on this. He's also, I think we've worked on 3 shows with him by now. He's also done a new show for us called Chef, and he's just wonderfully, wonderful, talented. And you can tell, it's a dingy little apartment. It's tiny, and yet it looks so big and so rich, and there's so much going on there, sometimes off camera and on camera. And I highly urge you to watch the entire season. Episode 10, I think, is some of the best television ever produced.
It really is special. It really is.
And there's some choices there, not just, everything in that show works. And I think it's not just the technical part of it. The actors are great, and the writing is great, and the cinematographer is great, and the director is great, but the messaging of the show kind of puts it all together and puts it in perspective. And it's a show about adults. For those who haven't seen it yet, it's about three adults on the autistic spectrum and their friend, just living their life day to day, sharing an apartment, trying to figure out what's what, and challenging misconceptions and society, and looking for love and looking for work and trying to retain a job, and working through issues and family. And we made a very conscious choice, by the way. There's no parents in our version. There's a sibling. So there is a brother to a sister, and that's Danna's alter ego. She is the sister to her brother. So he is her caregiver. And in the show, we do not have any parents. In the US version, which you'll get to see hopefully later on this year, they actually did put parents in the show, and that was always Jason's. He was very adamant about it. He was like, I am the parent. I cannot not put myself in the show.
Right.
I know what it's like. I need to have a voice. So that's one of the things that is different. But other than that, it really just clicked because the messaging is super special, and everybody just wanted it, to work. And it really, really did. It's the most decorated foreign language show, actually, I think, ever. We have toured the world with the show for about a year and a half, winning everything from, Series Mania, which is the #1 kind of international television festival that's in Lille in France. From there to, we won in Seoul, Korea. We won the biggest award for all the world. It's not just an Asian or European. It's like the big drama award. We won 3 awards in Monte Carlo for the acting and the show itself and the writing. So we won I think 9 Israeli TV Academy Awards. So it's a gift. Working on the show is a privilege. Bringing it to people is a privilege. I feel it's such an important message, and I'm so glad that people in the U.S. will be able to see it, and there'll be an adaptation for those that are kind of still wary of watching foreign series or reading subtitles or listening to dubs. They'll also have the opportunity to see an American show with the same themes, and could be happier. So
I believe it's being released in April. I believe it's being released in April, so that it coincides with National Autism Month, I believe. Has it garnered a lot more conversation in Israel about being on the spectrum and the situation?
Yes.
Just on the street conversation.
Well, we worked with Bet Eckstein on the show. We had 2 consultants who are on this. One has Asperger's, the other one's autistic. One is 37, the other one's 40. They were consultants, very active consultants. One of them has written a diary, and a lot of the situations that he's described actually made it straight into the show. So that comes directly from him. And we worked with Bet Eckstein, who actually work with adults on the spectrum, teaching them life skills and being what we call a hostel. It's not a hostel in the US sense. It's just like safe housing where people can learn skills and life skills and educate it. And part of their mission is to get people out of these very controlled environments and out living in apartments much like the one that we have on the show. And we put a little at the end, at the end of the credits, we put a little, thank you to Bet Eckstein. If you want to find out more or learn more, or, if you're a business owner and want to hire people who are on the spectrum, this is their address. Their site crashed by episode 2. Wow. And I think at the end of the run, they gave us some number. It was in the thousands of, business owners that had submitted requests to hire people on the spectrum for their business. So that is such a privilege to know that you've made something that actually in the real life kind of transcends entertainment and transcends the screen and can actually instigate some kind of change and awareness and a conversation. Usually that happens. Very rarely does that happen. Usually if it does, it happens with documentaries. So, people, will stop going to SeaWorld because, they've seen a documentary, or, I stopped eating at McDonald's back in 2004 when I saw Super Size Me, or people become vegetarian or vegan, or, or right. have their political identities, kind of open. So that happens. We know that happens, but usually with documentaries and unscripted, and having the opportunity to do it with a scripted show is such a privilege. And although our actors are not autistic, I don't think that dilutes the message any way. I think, you know, they've done a wonderful job. And I think they've conveyed that wide spectrum of emotion brilliantly, and people, you know, have gotten up and moved because of that show and made a difference.
Well, you really are kol hakavod, because it makes a difference to anybody who sees it. And I hope everybody in our community takes advantage of your generosity and kindness and takes a look at it. So a new show that you and I did not discuss ahead of time, that one of your biggest fans is my daughter, Jenna. And Jenna calls me up the other day. She says, I just finished watching a show. I don't know how. She said, you've got to ask Donna when we can see The Chef.
Ah, that's a good question.
I'm asking that question because otherwise Jenna would be very mad with me.
The Chef, that's actually a really good question, because The Chef is super well done. Guy Raz, who I mentioned, who was a cinematographer, also did that. It's beautiful, but it's a challenge. It's really challenging it did phenomenally well here. It's our second most watched series this year after Fuda 3. People loved it. We immediately commissioned a second season, and there was something about it that I think maybe because restaurants were closed for a year, and suddenly this is like an insider's view of what it's like working in a busy professional kitchen, plus, you know, how hard it is and how much you have, you know, random sex and casual relationships and access to alcohol and drugs, and all that really resonated with viewers here. It had a great soundtrack, you know, sexy for us. Like, we don't do a lot of sex at all in any of our shows, not because we're queers, and it's just not a thing. We don't feel like we need to, you know, put it all out there. That show did have, you know, some moments of sex, some of them actually gratuitous sex. Didn't really move the plot along, but it was there. And people here just went gaga. And I have to say, it's the first time I see such a huge disconnect between the international market, the kind of buyers we go to, and the local market. As much as it was beloved here, people have been very kind, you know, buyers, you know, I don't want to name any platforms, but, you know, they've all watched and they've all come back and said, look, it's beautiful, but does it need to be an Israeli show? Like, we have restaurants, we have macho men, we have middle-aged men, you know, battling out for their, like, it's too universal almost. There's no reason to make that effort, you know, to subtitle or dub, or, you know, why would I need to buy this show to show to an audience? If we're going to buy a foreign language show, we want to get something different, something that doesn't exist where we are. You know, a different culture, you know, Farada, think, obviously Shtisel, you know, Beauty Queen. You can't have Beauty Queen of Jerusalem somewhere else. It's got to be here, right? And that show is a little too universal to make it on air. So we'll see. We'll see. That one's yeah. It's been interesting because everybody I was talking to has been so kind, but it's like, but it's not for us. And right. So we'll see. So maybe, you know, I'll just have to send you guys screeners.
Well, that would be okay. That would be okay. That was Jenna's next question. The last question, Donna, is people were asking, with this plethora of Israeli content, how does one know that something's available or out on Netflix or Showtime or HBO Max or Apple TV? Where is there a repository of this information?
That's a really good question. I mean, as far as I know, there's no like one database. I mean, as I said, you know, we're kind of each running our own show. I can speak for us. I mean, we're on social media. Yes Studios is on Instagram and Facebook for all our shows that are international brands. We also run international social media for them. We never give up those rights to the buyers. So we run Fuda Official, anything to do with Fuda, it's going to be available there. We run Shtisel Official. For all the Shtisel fans out there, come join us. You know, we were the ones to announce the Netflix launch date. We just announced France today because we weren't available in France. We just cleared up those rights. So there's a lot of content that we make available specifically for the shows that we know have an international audience, and it's obviously all in English. And we try to post, and we're also very wary of the time difference, so we try to post where it makes sense for international audiences. So I say for our shows, that's a good place to start. There are, you know, a lot of Jewish newspapers that aren't papers or trade or newsletters that now kind of follow the industry. I think it just started something out of curiosity. And now they're actually like entertainment reporters. We have an ongoing list. We try to update them and everything that we do because we know that's a good way to get to audiences.
Right.
A lot of the times, the platforms will put out information, and just it's like a tipping point. Your friends start watching it, you start hearing about it from 2, 3 people. It used to be like the way that you were recommended to read a book. Somebody read, but said you have to read this, and then 2 people said, and by person 3, you're like, okay, I'm gonna get the book. So it's kind of like that with television. Enough people will tell you about it.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for really the privilege of you taking time. As we were getting ready to start, you were in the middle of multiple business calls.
I was screaming at someone about a thing. Yeah.
Right. So, but thank you for sending us those links, and really, we owe you a big debt of gratitude just for what you bring to all of our families, and for the friendship, and for you've been wonderful to our community. And one of these days we can get you to Virginia Beach, which would maybe next year after APAC you'll stop by. But
yeah, but definitely, I think what we do is ultimately and the only thing that matters is the audience. You can't be in this business if you don't want people to watch what you're doing. And if this is a way to reach, and if by doing this, we got a few more people interested in On the Spectrum, and they'll recommend it to a few other people, we've done our bit, right? And that's why I do these with much love, because I want to get people excited about what we're making, not just us, just everybody in the country. I think
you're a special person. I mean that. And again, thank you. So I hope everybody takes a chance to watch the 2 episodes of Spectrum. A special treat, again, thanks to Danna, ahead of its US release on HBO Max. And again, many thanks to the United Jewish Federation, the Simon Family JCC, the Embassy, upcoming JCC, the Patricia Abraham Ashkenazi and Alma and Howard Lederberg Jewish Film Festival. And you can go online and get tickets to watch that. And thank you to the Federation staff and to Robin and Jill and everybody. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, have a wonderful Chag Sameach and be safe.